Can you explain how damaging our support for Israel has been to the United States?
Well, it certainly has affected our reputation around the world, and it has made us look like hypocrites. We have portrayed ourselves as a champion of human rights. That goes back to actually President Carter in the late 70s that he decided to pursue that policy, and it's something that's been continued. Often very hypocritically. It was. But yeah, no question, even going back to the Carter years. But this hypocrisy right now is breathtaking. We're actually, very much complicit in a genocide, and the world sees it. We don't see it, we don't, or refuse to see it. The vast majority of Americans, and it's also the vast majority of Israelis. I understand it's like these liberal Israelis are worried about these threats to their society. The loss of an independent judiciary and so on and so forth. It's something that has brought people out into the streets. But, the whole world is looking at Israel and saying, these people are committing a genocide. And it's, I used to be sympathetic to them, but no longer. Their reputation has suffered greatly. But among the Israelis themselves and among the Americans, we're not seeing it. But the rest of the world is seeing it. And it makes us, it doesn't affect our military power, our hard power, certainly in the near term or the medium term, but it does have a real impact on our soft power. I mean, that the talk about human rights, well, often it was hypocritical, but there was at least a kernel of truth to it. Now people look at it and just say, this is just entirely bogus. These people are just liars. It's all hollow. And so our soft power, I think, has suffered a real blow. You still have a lot of people around the world that are just kind of almost worship the West, the American West, but that, but I don't think that is sustainable, past the near or medium term now.
Yeah, I imagine it has to have taken a severe blow. I mean, it almost makes me not want to live in America when I see what we're doing over there. It really is, it's something that I'm very ashamed about, and there's not really anything we can do. It's, we live here in the Bible Belt in the United States, and it's amazing to me to see that evangelical Christians seem to be more fervent supporters of Israel and Zionism than Jews in America are. There seems to be some division within Jews. There's the Jewish Voice for Peace. We talked about young Jews are rejecting Israel, but it's not the case with evangelical Christians in the United States. And I'm just wondering, well, first, can you explain why that's the case? Why they have such a strong support for Israel? And then I'm also just worried about the impact of Christianity in the United States after this is all said and done. When this is over, when it becomes undeniable what has happened and what we've supported in Israel, what would that mean just for, this is supposed to be they say the evangelicals, we're a Christian nation, we're a Christian, and then it's like, oh, well, that's a bad mark. What will that mean? What will that do to our society and everything? I think there's some we're going to go through a big crisis once this is over. That's something that I'm worried about here.
Yeah. Well, the reason that it's so prevalent among evangelical Christians in particular is Christian Zionism, which is something that developed independently of Zionism. And in fact, it preceded it only by a few years, but it did. So you had people advocating this particular interpretation of the Bible and of the end times, which flatly contradicted all traditional understandings that existed in churches, prior to the late 19th century. And at first it was a fringe movement, but it eventually, it spread, and then it really took off after the Six-Day War in 1967. And then one book in particular had a huge impact. I remember this book. I never read it, but I remember seeing it around and hearing about it. The Late Great Planet Earth. That was a Christian Zionist bestseller. And, it appeared in, I guess it was the early 70s. Or that's when it was really had a huge impact. So yeah, Christian Zionism is, I would say, definitely it is a perversion of Christianity. It goes against all the traditional understandings of traditional interpretations of Scripture and the relationship of the Old Testament to the New Testament. It, yeah, I don't think we have time to go into it in detail. We did in a previous podcast. Maybe we can do it again in a future podcast. But essentially, for our purposes, what we need to understand here is that it teaches the Christians, the believers in this Christian Zionism, to support Israel, the Jewish Israel, and to see that as an important step or instrument in God's plan to bring, about the end of the world and the second coming of Jesus Christ. And so these people have been convinced of that, and unfortunately, they're Christian virtues of compassion and other Christian virtues have been sacrificed on the altar of this. So you have Christians, unfortunately, these Christian Zionists that just that support a really bloodthirsty and again now I think we can very fairly say a genocidal program. I don't know how many, actually understand. I don't know. I can't judge each person individually. I'm sure many of these are good people, that if they really knew the truth would be horrified. Unfortunately, I think some of them actually just don't care. Probably know it's a genocide, but somehow think it's all right. Those people are just as guilty as as the Israeli Jews who know what they're doing and are perpetrating this genocide.